the Vice President from the Beverly Hills and Hollywood chapter of the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored Persons. And last but not least, we have Casey Peters, LA County Chairperson for the Peace and Freedom Party. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Jeff.
First of all, Casey, tell us about the Peace and Freedom movement.
Well, the Peace and Freedom Party was formed in 1967 as the electoral arm of the civil rights movement and the anti-war movement. At that time, of course, the Democrats had us in a war in Vietnam, and people needed a way to register their discontent with the way the Democrats and Republicans are running this country.
Connie, a lot of people I know said to me before we did the show, people like yourselves, you just have a big chip on the shoulder. There really is no major racial problem in this country. Is that true?
No, it isn't true, and unfortunately, even here in 1987, we're still having to do a show on racism. One thing we're trying to do is to abolish racism, and all, excuse me, the NAACP is interested in is having fair and equal treatment for everyone and not based upon race or color or sex.
Tom, you're the former Grand Dragon of the KKK of California. Tell us a little bit about what it takes to become a KKK member and what the KKK is all about.
Well, I'm not an official spokesman because I'm not with the organization, but the KKK is mostly made up of white working people that are fed up with affirmative action, a lot of the other problems they face in this country. They realize that 2/3 of the nation's poor are white, but they get very little attention. So the Ku Klux Klan is a lodge-type organization, ceremonial and secret to a degree, and they go about their business working for white people the best that they can.
You say working for white people, but we're all supposed to be here together. Why can't we live in peace and harmony?
Well, I think that if we look at the NAACP, we find a National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. And I think that if they would respect the fact that there are 2/3 of the country's poor or white, and there are groups that are working for their best interest, and they respected that, I think that we could get along a lot better. But as long as the leaders of the United States and the leaders of these organizations do not see the problem the white working people have in facing affirmative action and so forth, there's going to be big problems.
You keep saying white people, but as I said before, we are supposed to be all in one.
Who said that? Where is that written?
Well, we're all here.
It surely isn't written in stone, or nature surely hasn't written it, and so we are very...
Jefferson wrote it. It said all people are created equal.
Thomas Jefferson said, but knowing that they should be free, they should be separated. Thomas Jefferson's statements on the base of the statue, not the Statue of Liberty, but the Jefferson Memorial, they left out the part. He was a slave owner. Even on his deathbed, he only freed one slave. He was a hypocrite.
I agree, he was.
But he was a rich
for going
racist.
along with the constitutional enactment of slavery. The Constitution's founding fathers approved the slave trade, the continuation of the slave trade, which was what brought us the Civil War.
Which was very bad for white people. This slave trade is very bad for white people.
It's bad for all
very
people.
bad for the continent today, as we've seen the expansion of Negro people.
You say it was very bad for white people, but the same with the black people. It wasn't that hot for them.
Oh, well, that's true, and they should... Well, it wasn't good when the tribal black leaders in Africa sold their own brothers into slavery, but remember, only 1% of the white population in the South controlled 99% of the wealth. The majority of poor and lower middle-class people in the South didn't control anything. So to blame slavery on them is ridiculous.
That's right. At first, it was only property owners who were allowed to vote. White male property owners over 21, and many states had restrictions on religion as to who could vote. Well, fortunately, we have made great strides in this country toward allowing universal suffrage, where everybody can vote.
As long as you have enough bucks in your pocket.
Our problem now, well, that's true. The rich people still control the electoral system. The problem now is we don't have proportional representation. Black people form only about 4% of the United States Congress, whereas they're about 12% of the population. Hispanics, Asians, and other working poor people are definitely underrepresented because we don't have a fair electoral system.
We don't have a problem about proportional representation because I'm a racial separatist. I'm not a segregationist. I don't believe in economic determinism. I believe in racial and cultural determinism. So get me out of the corporate bag. Get me away from the white elitists, because those are the ones that are selling us out as white people and all people out in general. It's called economic feudalism.
So what you're saying is, let's go back a few years. In the 18th century, I got a piece here from the French philosopher Voltaire. He wrote, and I quote, "The other races are as different from whites as a breed of spaniels is from that of greyhounds, not just in appearance but in intelligence as well. If their understanding is not of a different nature from ours, it is at least inferior." Tom, do you still have that belief?
I think that a majority of leaders down through time have taken a position like that, but unfortunately the economic elite want to use cheap labor, and they've used blacks as scabs to break the American labor movement, the white labor movement in the beginning, in the 20s, 30s, and before that. And we've all been a victim of that kind of problem.
That's
so
very true.
As a separatist, I don't care who's equal, who's superior. If we're separate, who cares?
Well, nobody's
Blacks should
superior.
have self-determination. That's why I get along fine with black nationalists.
But racism has been used, as you point out, in order to break up the labor movement. And
Everybody's a racist.
What we all should be fighting for is full employment economy, so that the bosses can't use us like that.
Isn't that going to be a full employment economy when your corporates are shipping all the jobs and factories out of the country and bringing massive numbers of Asians and others in to even oppress black and white workers?
Massive question. How do you expect a separatist society then to survive within a country which has a dichotomy of such closely related interreactions with different peoples?
Well, that's because it's always based on economic determinism, and we do not support that. Economic determinism is not the program for the 21st century. If we continue to follow that panacea, we're going to destroy ourselves in nuclear war. But we do believe in the right of self-determination and wars of self-determination. We believe within an area, a landmass, a tribal idea, an extended family idea should be allowed to work, and it would work if government and the economic interests were off our backs.
Well, if you believe in self-determination, then surely you're against U.S. intervention in the affairs of other countries.
Absolutely.
Internal affairs such as in Nicaragua,
Absolutely.
where the United States is trying to conduct a war against a democratically elected government.
We do not believe in that at all. We believe these wars have been used over and over. They're economic wars, and they continue to be economic wars, and we tell all our people, don't volunteer for the draft. Don't get involved in that stuff. Our struggle is right here in the United States.
But you think self-determining wars, though, are okay?
Pardon me? Self-determination? Well, I'm not saying that everybody involved in a war of determination is a good guy, because sometimes you have people representing one economic gang fighting a group that represents another economic gang. In other words, we look at the Soviet Union as a state capitalist state. They're not a communist state, it's state capitalism. What we have here is monopoly capitalism. They're all warring in these little brush fire wars for money and profit and greed.
But I thought I heard you mention a little earlier that you feel wars for self-determination, though, were sometimes warranted. Did I not hear you correctly?
Definitely. The people, the Nicaraguan people should have whatever kind of system they want, and any other country. They want a dictatorship, fine. They want democracy, fine.
Well, they do have a democracy. I was there earlier this year, and I spoke with the leaders of several of the opposition political parties in Nicaragua who do have proportional representation. Each party, regardless of its size, has the same proportion of seats in the legislature as it got votes in the election. They had a very fair election where each party, regardless of its size, got an equal amount of television time for 8 weeks prior to the election. We don't have anything like that here. Here, it's only money that counts. If you don't have the money, the Peace and Freedom Party is very poor. We run out of our pockets, where we run out of people's living rooms. It's a grassroots movement which is not backed by millionaires and multinational corporations who have no allegiance to the United States of America.
Well, I'm for all the small parties. I think they should be on national TV right along with the big shots, so we have no disagreement there.
Let's go back to a question that I asked and you carefully avoided. I asked what your opinion was about Voltaire's
Well, I believe if you look at things from a Westerner, in the sense that we traditionally talk about Western European civilization or European civilization, that as we see advancement, we see it basically a product of Caucasoid, Caucasian, white people. Now, you may look at another race of people who have not developed that type of civilization, which we would say is not equal in that area, but if they like the civilization they have built, they are obviously, evolutionary-wise, very successful. They're here, so in that way, they're successful. White people are outnumbered 10 to 1 in the world, so the non-whites are very successful. But if you look at it from a Western European or a European, our idea of culture and civilization, I think, basically is different.
But the bottom line, I think, is do you believe that persons who are non-whites are intellectually inferior to white people.
There's exceptions to the rule, but I believe, of course, in general, I believe the black race is several points in general below white.
How do you base that?
However, the way the schools are run, the whites are dropping fast.
Well, you can see wherever
But you see, this is
color
a buzz
have the
argument,
opportunity.
because I don't care about that. That would have been a segregationist argument. I don't care who's superior, who's equal, who's this stuff. I'm a separatist. I don't want to be over you. I don't want to have power over you. I don't want to press you. I don't want to rob you.
You just don't want people like Bonnie here.
I want her to have her own society and not be made a fool of by the white elite in this country, which you are.
But you want my society, though, to be in close proximity to yours.
No. No, absolutely. Total separation.
Does that mean you're going to go back to Europe?
Own representatives, own cops, own governors, own mayors, blacks. If blacks tell me that they are great people and they can invent and so forth and do all these things, then do it. I'm all for it.
Well, first of all, let me address the issue
if I was black, that's what I'd want.
Of education. It's very clear that whenever people of color have educational opportunities equal to those of the majority of the population, that they do, in fact, excel. Just like anybody who is nurtured and encouraged will excel if they're given opportunities. But we have a very high unemployment rate still in our economy. It used to be that 3% unemployment was considered normal. Now 7% is considered normal. But if you look at the black community or Hispanic community, you can see that the unemployment is so large that it's very discouraging to people, and so they turn to crime, they turn inward and use drugs, instead of being given the opportunity to contribute fully their talents and abilities to society.
Well, what about the two-thirds of the poor who are white?
Well, they should have the same educational opportunities as well.
We'll stop there for just a second. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes when we talk more about racism. We'll see you in just 2 minutes. Welcome back to Let's Talk. Tom, I just read a report yesterday, in fact, that in the 1987 Anti-Defamation League special report, it attributes the increase in criminal violence over the last 3 years, which includes things such as armed robbery, synagogue bombings and murder, to the neo-Nazi, Ku Klux Klan and the anti-Jewish groups. What have you got to say about that?
Well, the Anti-Defamation League, number one, is an agent of a foreign power, a Zionist, Israel, a spokesman, and they do not like my activities, and I don't like their activities because they defame a lot of people. Anyone who's critical of pouring billions of dollars into Israel, they call an anti-Semite. So I don't take too much stock in what they say. Now, obviously, they take any incident that happens from the so-called white nationalists or whatever you want to call them and build it into a earth-shaking deal, while crime on the streets of the most atrocious, horrible types go on every day.
Let's talk a little bit about WAR, you're the director of.
Yes.
What's their purpose?
Well, racially conscious white people. These are the people we seek out. People, actually, they come to us because after they've been victimized and lost their jobs and so forth due to nothing that they've done, and they're a lot of times better on the job than the person that replaces them, they say, hey, what have I got to look forward to? I can't pay my house payment, I can't pay the rent. They're looking for somebody to champion their position. Now, if we had leaders in this country, and I don't mean any of these turkeys who are running for president right now, that cared about the people, then there wouldn't have to be war. If one of the candidates would say, hey, two-thirds of the white people, people out there who are poor are white, we got to do something for these white people too, then there would be no need for war. And so as long as there are people left out, there's going to be a need for war.
But, Mr. Mester, where the problem comes in is that the black people were those very same people that have been left out for several hundred years. And the reasons that we have affirmative action is because the people who have a right to be in this country, just like anyone else, although we were brought here against our will, but we are here, we helped build this country, we have just as much right to be here as anyone else. And we feel that we were getting the short end of the stick. We were not getting a fair shake from these same so-called leaders. But we had some people who were strong enough and felt committed enough to stand up and fight for what they got. Fight for the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Fight for the Voting Rights Act. We fought and died and bled until we got these rights. And if you have two-thirds, as you say, of the white people that are poor, then they need to rise up if that's what it takes. But I feel that the causes of their poverty, as you put it, The system is already there in place. It was put there, set up for white people to use. Welfare was set up for the white population. It was not set up for black people. We were working on the farms.
How did you come to that?
We were working on the farms. The WPA was not set up and designed for black people. We were not allowed to take federal government monies for anything. We were on the farmlands. We weren't even in the cities for the most part. We couldn't even apply for Social Security and welfare, only until we got rights and that we had to fight for in the courts, in the White House, in the police stations, in the streets. That's how we got a chance to even qualify to be equal to people who we walking next to every day.
They wanted cheap labor. They don't want to associate with you, but they want your sweat.
That's right.
I understand that. I understand that.
There are more of you, so why can't you go get out there and work just like we did for peanuts?
Hey, let me tell you something. I did work like that. I'm from the fields of Indiana, raised on the farm, and I worked just as hard as anybody in the South picking cotton.
Then you should understand.
I was down a swamp.
You should understand.
I know what work is like,
and
I know the degradation the white poor went through during the Industrial Revolution, and in the factories of the North were just as degraded as blacks in the South.
Then you should understand that white people need to band together with black people to fight the bosses of the society instead of fighting against other people of other races. You have common interests with other poor people.
There can be dialogue.
White poor people, black poor people, Hispanics, Asians should all band together to democratically control the resources of our society.
But to come together for a mutual decision upon something that affects both of you doesn't mean you have to lose your identity. Most blacks and most liberal whites want us to lose our identity in the quest to battle the economic determinists, which will never work. The black, the NAACP fell into a trap. These people fell into a trap. They gave them short-range gains, and they think they're moving out. They're going to pull a rug out from under you because you bought it. You should have went for black separatism, like the leaders, Marcus Garvey, and so forth.
But do you suggest that all the southern states should be given to black people for a separate nation? Is that what you're
I'm saying that some form of separatist idea is the only solution that will get us out of a major social upheaval.
I doesn't believe that a separatist society is necessary for the survival of the people.
Well, not for the colored people, no, but for white people it is.
For any people. We can all work
worldwide, we're outnumbered 10 to 1. 10 to 1. We realize our minority. Many black leaders brag about
We're all human beings. We
don't want to become black, and if I was black, I wouldn't want to become white.
We don't.
But we want to preserve our identity.
Nobody's saying that you have to change. You're going to look the way you look until you die, you know, and your children are going to be white. That's fine. Nobody's saying you have to integrate if you don't want to.
European-type culture and race on the North American continent. And we're not going to allow
The North American continent belongs to the Native Americans.
The Native Americans should go back Mongolians. They came from Asia.
You should
give me that Native American
You came from Europe a lot later than they came from Asia.
That argument.
Why don't you go back to Europe if you don't like it here?
Because he who has holds, and we will have our political power on this continent.
So what you're saying is the white people have the right to use... Could you let me speak for a moment? It seems like this militaristic idea that white people have, okay, you're outnumbered 10 to 1, so you're going to have 10 to 1 more guns than the rest of the world.
You're
and
white
go take
people.
Everybody
What do you mean
else.
White people? I hear the same kind of stuff from black people.
I'm a human being. I don't care. I don't care whether people are white, Asian, Spanish, or whatever.
And these other people, they carve out turf like mad. Don't come in our neighborhood, we'll kill you. And then you say white people's attitude.
That's because they got it. It's the Spanish
I think Mexico's a beautiful country. I'd love to help them with a revolution.
Have you got anything?
Wipe out the oligarchy, weaken the church. Fine, and all the Mexican people would love to be in Mexico. The reason they're here is because they're brutalized.
This is Mexico. You know, President Polk committed war against Mexico when it had just won independence from Spain, and they took over the entire southwest of what is now the United States.
There were a few thousand people,
Mexicans
and most of those were Spanish white people who were here under land grants.
It was President Grant.
This is improved
President Grant said that the Civil War was brought about by the Mexican-American War because the free enslaved states fought over what the Western states were going to be.
Inequities on both sides. Certainly people like Santana and people like those jerks were creeps too.
All militarists are jerks.
There was this problem on both sides, but the point is this is now improved property. And to negotiate with the same principles as when there was only a few thousand Mexicans here. In fact, most of them came after the gold rush started.
There were only a few thousand white people. You are white people.
The point is, what are you saying to us? Now, you're talking as a non-white now.
I'm saying if you're a racist...
You're a white man talking as a non-white.
I'm saying if you're a racist and you don't want to be with all the peoples of the world, which to me is the wonderful thing about Los Angeles, it's the most cosmopolitan city in the world, if you don't like that, then go to some place
How come
where there are
nature
only white
didn't
people.
develop us all one color then? How come we've taken
Because we're a
separate
rainbow.
paths
The human race
of
has got
evolution?
great diversity.
Why?
It's a wonderful,
Why?
beautiful
Tell
thing.
me.
You have to learn that.
We've taken separate paths of evolution. Why?
It's less inferior than another.
Nobody's inferior. Is a daffodil inferior to a rose or to
That's why I'm giving you the
begonia?
answer. Separatism.
No.
Let people have their areas and have self-determination.
Well, what if I like different flowers in my garden?
I'm not a king or a tyrant. I mean, I don't know exactly where people will go, but at least give them freedom of choice. Would you give us freedom of choice?
Where do you
yes, I
want
give
to
you the
go?
freedom
Can
of
we have a
choice.
white club?
I give you the
And you have a
freedom of
black
choice.
club?
If you want to be a racist,
And you
go to
have
some
a
place
mixed up
where
club?
there's only people of your
You
color.
just said something I want to pick up. You said, let us have the freedom of choice. You just said
And
it
we
in
don't
one.
have it.
I do.
We don't have
I do
it.
because I live
You
in the
can't
United
have an
States
all-white
where I can
club.
go to an Ethiopian restaurant, I can go
can't
to a
have-
Thai restaurant, I
Sure,
can go to
but
a
can you
Mexican
go to a-
restaurant. This is a wonderful place
Can you go
because
to
we
a
have all
National
cultures.
Socialist restaurant or something like that, or a Ku Klux Klan restaurant where it's all whites or something?
Well, I'm sure that there are many of them who run restaurants. You know,
We're on Tom here, but let me just point out one thing. Can a white person go into an NAACP meeting?
We have many white members.
They play both sides of the fence.
We have
Why don't
many
you play
white
both
members.
sides of the fence?
I don't believe in being a hypocrite. They'll take the money from the big shot Jews who ran the organization. Most of the time it's been in existence.
That's not
they did
true.
not run the organization themselves. All the early leaders of the NAACP were Jews. And I'm glad
you
the
got
blacks
something
did
against
try to
Jews,
take...
too?
Well, should they be running black organizations?
Well, if they should participate in any
I
organization,
thought black
freedom of
people were
choice.
supposed to run
You
their
were
own
just saying
organization.
No,
freedom
you
of choice.
said
They're
that.
getting
We
money.
never
They
said
chose to
that.
join the
They
organization.
get a lot of
and
government
participate.
money. As long as you play the
We do
line...
not get government money.
You're
You're
against
getting
freedom
money.
of
You know
We're
choice.
a
you get it.
non-profit
You're
organization.
funded.
Our money comes from memberships and contributions
Right.
and fundraisers
From the
that we
big shot
do.
corporations and all that kind of
If
stuff.
we have a fundraiser, they
Why
may
do you
buy
think
an
they
ad in
care
our
about
souvenir
you?
program.
They
Big
want to
deal.
keep you docile and quiet.
No, they
don't want you back out in the streets.
Because they want our money. They recognize
They're
the
afraid
black
to go
people
back in the
of this
streets.
country are productive
We are in the
human
streets.
beings who have money
Corporations are
to
afraid to
spend
go
to
back.
buy their products, and that's why they want our money. I'm not fooling up
Up
to think
until
that they
now,
just
you've
love
been a
the
minority
black-
race
Excuse
in a
me, sir.
majority
Would you
country.
mind letting her speak? You know, you really are rude, not letting somebody speak their fair
You get
share.
your share in, don't you?
Yes, and it's about time to let Connie
Well,
get her
represent
share.
the
Would you
Peace and
please not
Freedom
interrupt?
Party. I listen to her.
No, you weren't
I'm
listening.
listening to the party
You were
line. You both
interrupting.
have it down pretty
Connie, you
fast.
go ahead.
Forgot the question.
It's something I was asking you before about the whites are allowed in black places. What do you think about segregation anyway?
I think, number one, living in the country that we live in, we are either by force or by choice. We still are thrown together. We meaning different peoples need one another. There are white corporations, there are black corporations. There are white manufacturers, there are Hispanic manufacturers. There are Asians this, and there are Thai that, and there are Vietnamese this. And we all serve a purpose to make life better in this country for whomever lives here.
Is
And
life better?
I think it is.
You think life is better?
It's a lot better, no thanks to people like you. We have had to still rise above those of you who would leave us back where we were 400 years ago.
Your
when we
race
first
is
got off the
committing the
boat.
largest percentage of crime in this country.
That is not true.
Vicious crime.
That is not
Mostly
true.
against your own people.
That
If
is
you
not
count
true.
it by dollars, you'll find
And
that
as
it's
you
the
become
white
more integrated, the
heads
more
of
crime you
corporations
commit on
that are
white people.
creating
No,
the crime.
that is not true.
That's what I don't respect about the NAACP. They don't clean out their own doorstep. They don't talk about their own problems.
We always, the reason the NAACP was formed was to address our own problems. However, those problems, though, in the beginning were not caused by black people. They were caused by racist persons who felt that black people had no right or no business being in this country.
What about the
and
black slave
surviving
owners
and
that were in the
working.
South? What
We'll
about the
come
black
back in
tribes?
just
All
a
of
moment
what?
with these two
10.
arguing. Stay tuned, we'll be back in just 2 minutes.
The Indian slave owners.
Welcome back to Let's Talk. Tom, Some psychologists suggest that the feeling that some non-white groups are inferior, lazy and dishonest is not through people studying other groups, but it's from, as I read here, stems from inadequacy and laziness within themselves, which they cannot accept.
Sure, there's that. It's all mixed up together, and the same reason for other races feel the same way, but there are genuine people who study it very carefully and come to a decision. A lot of them combine experience with people and study and come to that decision. And of course, there's people like that too. So it takes all kinds of people to make up a racial feeling.
I think that what the psychologists...
We don't say everybody that's white is right. We're in a white civil war in this country. Our biggest problem is among our own.
How do you come to that? We're in a white civil war. That's
because most whites are robots, automatons. They're just walking around with nothing but feed me, feed me, feed me, consumers, you know, let's go to Central America, whatever it is. They're not thinking. If their television broke down, they wouldn't have an opinion about anything. That's the average. So
you have a very low attitude on most people by the sounds of it.
Well, I'm saying that that's what we become in this consumerist society. It's unfortunate, and that, of course, our masters want to create a worldwide shopping center with no differences in speech, no differences of race or anything that would interfere with consumerism. That's what it's all about. They hate separation of the races. They hate racial identity. It gets in the way of profits. And so when we champion the identity and separation, we are against these people. I have no problem with black people being black. I can sit down with this lady here, we can have no problem. But we're not going to integrate. Why can't we talk about our problems without integrating? You don't have to integrate.
Isn't that an act of integration?
Pardon me?
To communicate with people of other races?
No,
isn't that an act of
because
integration?
all white nations have had diplomatic connection with non-white countries for hundreds of years without integrating. So you can have very good relations. I can admire Japan from afar as a great empire, but that doesn't mean I want to become a Japanese.
Let's talk about something that I know happened in San Diego on the border. I believe you were arrested some time ago, is that right?
No, I was arrested here in Los Angeles at a private gathering.
Okay, but there was some problem with you picking up illegal aliens, I believe, down the border.
No. I had a border watch, which when I was in the Klan, and that was way back in the 70s, that we did put men on the border as a symbolic thing to try to convince the Border Patrol and the government to do something real about controlling the border.
But I understand there was violence used as well. Is that...
No, there was no violence. If there had, I'd have been in jail. None of the people who were with me were in jail. Some people tried to take it to court. We took them to court, and it was a draw. So, no, but I think we had a lot to do with arousing the people that we just can't keep taking people on board. But the problem is, in Washington now, they've given the American people a placebo that they've solved the problem, and they haven't solved the problem at all. It's getting worse.
If you want to curtail immigration...
Blacks really ought to be into this, and they're not saying anything about illegal aliens.
Well, that's because they're not as racist. You know, but
they're going to be at the bottom of the stack. I want to tell you first, the Mexicans will come in, and you're out. Then the Asians will come in, and the Mexicans are out. And then we'll all be out.
What do you mean, then we're out?
I think he's talking about cheap labor. He's trying to talk cheap labor.
Out and leadership, because once the masses of Asia get a foothold in this country, forget it. We're all going to be slaves.
Well, that don't happen to...
they don't have slavery in Asia.
One thing that I do...
you would call working for $1 a month or something like that.
That's what we do here. We're wage slaves.
You call it free trade, right? Are you a Republican?
Here.
Huh?
We're wage slaves. That's true, because we don't have control of our economy. But if you want to curtail immigration, what you should be doing is trying to develop the economies of other countries.
Oh, I hope they raise their labor bill to $20 an hour.
We should abolish the debts to Mexico.
Sure, I'm all for them.
We should abolish the debt of Brazil, and we should stop the war in Central America, which is driving hundreds of thousands of people here who want to escape the war.
See, now I know why we recruit so many of your people in our organization. We talked a lot of the same language.
I know. I don't understand why you're a right-winger if you understand
I'm not a right-winger.
About the class
Half of our people came
society.
from the left. Two of our best writers in our newspaper, one's an ex-Trotskyite, the other is an IWW man. We've got as many left-wingers that come into our group as right-wingers. We're not into the reactionary
Anybody who's a racist is not a left-winger.
You see, the left, they've had racism in the left all along, all the way back, but basically left's been revolutionary. I want to get into Britain. You're from Britain.
Why does everybody want to pick on Britain?
I'm talking about racism in America.
When they come across here, these white kids from Britain, and 25% of them are on the dole or on welfare. They can't get jobs, but yet the British government keeps bringing more and more people from
You're talking about all the British people here in Los Angeles? We do have a very large British community who have escaped